their mother still alive?
Yes.
Good. There will be someone left to raise them.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Brianna. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is by far the most frightening film in the MCU. And one of the reasons it's so terrifying is that it draws from decades of other horror movies, and we're going to break down every horror movie reference and parallel that we found in this film. Now, of course, this film is also scary because it was directed by Sam frickin' Raimi, who's one of the greatest horror directors of all time.
Excuse me, Sam Raimi directed those happy fun Spider-Man movies.
But before that, he directed the much scarier Evil Dead Trilogy. And now for those references. In Multiverse of Madness' very first scene, a flying tentacle creature strikes Defender Strange in the leg, and the wound looks just like Ash's wound from Evil Dead 2. Both immediately festering and with dark veins jutting out of them. Raimi is letting us know early on that if we just take the time to look, references are going to be scattered across this entire movie. After America escapes the monster by jumping realities, we switch back to our Stephen Strange waking up from a nightmare. So this shot is a classic Raimi shot and one that he also uses in Evil Dead 2. Stephen goes to Christine's wedding where a giant eye monster shows up to ruin the big day. Tough luck on that one, Christine. Now, you can make the argument that all modern movie monsters pull from Godzilla, specifically the 1954 version, or there's also another giant monster in 1954's Them, which came out just a few months before Godzilla.
Person?
Yeah.
They're all referencing King Kong.
Where would I be without you? High five. But those aren't the references that we're going to be talking about right now. Instead, we're talking about how the monster died. Doctor Strange uses a spade to impale the monster and pull its eye out, veins and all. Sam Raimi has a bit of a thing for eyes, especially in his horror work. And this scene is exactly like Evil Dead 2, when a dead-eye's eye goes flying out of its head and into a poor soul's mouth. See, Christine, it definitely could have been worse. After the battle, Doctor Strange buries himself, definitely a reference to Army of Darkness.
What's that you got on your face? Huh?
Strange realizes the monster was controlled by witchcraft and goes to find the only witch he knows, Wanda. Now, we don't get a great look at it, but Wanda's cabin does look a little bit like the cabin we see at the beginning of Evil Dead.
Stretch.
Okay, a bit, but since Raimi helped define the cabin in the woods horror genre, I have to mention when there's a cabin in the woods, even if it's a cabin in an apple orchard and then a cabin in a red demonic hellscape. Once Wanda's outed as the Scarlet Witch, we see the Darkhold. Now, we originally saw the Darkhold in WandaVision and of course in the comics, so it's not like a direct reference to Raimi's other works. But it is really fun to mention that this is not the first time that Raimi has dealt with a cursed demonic book.
Necronomicon Ex Mortis. Roughly translated, Book of the Dead.
As the Scarlet Witch arrives at Carmartage, she brings in this dense, opaque fog, which shrouds Carmartage much like the alien fog shrouds the town in the mist. Or even like in John Carpenter's 1980 film, The Fog, where a horrible mist carried the ghosts of vengeful sailors into a small New England town. When Doctor Strange can't reason with her,
This is me being reasonable.
she absolutely levels Carmartage, including this one guy. Ooh, sorry, dude. Now, the next scene is chock to the brim with horror references. Wanda triggers a booby trap that traps her in the mirror dimension, but she reaches out to one of the walls and realizes it's liquid, a reference to an iconic Evil Dead scene where Ash reaches out to a mirror. Now, of course, the mirror dimension can't hold Wanda as she begins using the reflections to pull people in with her. They scramble to cover all the reflections, and America peers into a small puddle to find Wanda's eye staring back at her. Now, this is super similar to another Raimi classic, Drag Me to Hell, where the heroine discovers an eye in her cake.
Well, that's me, ruined for cake. Blech.
Right? Next, we get to the creepiest thing ever in a Marvel movie. Wanda escapes the mirror dimension by crawling through this mirrored gold plate, but her body comes out cut up and twisted before she pops everything back into place. Now, I've seen a lot of people say that this is a reference to The Ring, and they are very similar. After all, both Samara and Wanda are crawling out of things that should be impossible. But the contortion and cracking sound also reminds me a lot of the Japanese horror film Ju-on. And coincidentally, Raimi produced Ju-on's American remake, The Grudge. Wanda shows all the other timelines where she's happy before Doctor Strange attacks her with a magical Hydra. Now, this isn't a reference, but Strange does literally hiss at her like a snake.
I'm a slither little sneaky snake.
Wanda tries to take America's powers, levitating her in the process. America is lifted multiple times in this movie, but this particular shot is the most reminiscent of Reagan levitating from her bed in The Exorcist, right down to the white eyes and all. When America and Strange fall through realities, they go flying through several alternate realities, including this one, which could be straight out of the Resident Evil laser scene. America and Strange end up in Earth 838, and they see Ash Ash from Evil Dead. That's right, Bruce Campbell made an appearance in Multiverse of Madness, and while he's not quite Ash,
Pizza Papa always gets paid.
both characters' hands get possessed and proceed to beat the crap out of themselves. Luckily for Pizza Papa, this possessed hand is a little less murdery than this one. Later, when they drink the laced tea from Mordo, we get another classic Raimi shot where the images are stretched and distorted. We also see this when Wanda dreamwalks into her 838 body for the first time. Since this is a Raimi classic, this shot also occurs in...
Let me guess, Evil Dead?
Bingo! In Evil Dead 2, Raimi uses the exact same type of distortion when Ash is having a mental breakdown from, like dealing with all the Deadites and all that stuff. Wanda dreamwalks and we get this super creepy scene of her staring at herself through the window, which reminds us of Ash popping out of the mirror to talk to himself.
I don't think so.
Until the Darkhold is destroyed and she forces Wong to take her to Mount Wundagore. Meanwhile, Doctor Strange meets with the Illuminati and Wanda breaks in and all hell breaks loose. Now, Wanda isn't the first woman in horror to be covered in blood, or robot oil that looks very close to blood, and she certainly is not going to be the last. But Wanda's entrance is a direct reference to the 1976 Brian De Palma classic, Carrie. From the blood to the stiff posture to the raging fire behind them, Raimi uses this scene to pay homage to the original telekinetic horror villain. The Illuminati show up to stop Wanda, which, you know how it goes.
It's really cute that you're gonna defeat me with the power of friendship and all, but again, I am the devil from the Bible, so...
Black Bolt's picked off first with this truly horrifying kill.
What mouth?
So the creepy no mouth looks like it's a reference to the Twilight Zone movie where Sarah also doesn't have a mouth. But this has also been repeated several times since the 80s, most famously in The Matrix. Now, Reed might be the first person in film history to die by becoming human spaghetti, because I can't actually think of or find anything else this could be referencing. But take note, horror writers, that this should be a reference for future movies because, oh my god, he got turned into human spaghetti. Wanda takes out Captain Marvel by stripping away her powers, much like Agatha tried to do to her, and she cuts Captain Carter in half with her own shield. Now, the only person left to take her on is Professor X, who invades her mind. Now, while the rubble is clearly representative of the bombing Wanda suffered through as a child, the staging of this scene directly parallels the opening scene from the 2018 hit movie It. Oh, and by the way, Wanda only snaps his neck in the real world. Within her mind, she actually rips his head in half. Doctor Strange escapes the Illuminati's judgment room and goes back to help Christine in America. Now, this shadow shot is a widely used trope in horror and was originally popularized in Nosferatu. Raimi also used shadows in a very similar way in Drag Me to Hell. As Wanda chases the hero, she looks truly terrifying, with her eyes glowing red and her hair hanging over her face. This look calls back to zombie Wanda in What If, but the chase is also referencing another horror classic, The Shining. Wanda's limp, combined with the camera work, mirrors the iconic chase scene between Jack and Danny. Strange, Christine, and America almost escape from Wanda, but not quite.
Close, but no cigar.
Wanda catches up to them, sends Strange and Christine to an apocalyptic reality, and kidnaps America for herself. Also, poor 838 Wanda, man, she has just been put through the ringer. Strange and Christine go to this world's sanctum to try to find other Strange, and when they get there, Strange meets other Strange right in front of his giant swirling vortex, much like the vortex that Ash gets pulled into at the end of Evil Dead 2. We find out that Strange is actually Evil Strange, similar to the Evil Strange that we saw in What If. Now, much like how the Darkhold's not a direct reference to the Necronomicon, this isn't a direct reference to good and evil Ash from Army of Darkness, but it is a really fun parallel.
I'm bad, Ash. And you're good, Ash.
We also see that Evil Strange has a third eye, which is in the comics, but it could also be referencing a few different horror films, but I'm going to save that for later in the video. Our Strange defeats Evil Strange and then uses his copy of the Darkhold to dreamwalk into his dead body that he left behind on Earth 616. And finally, we get Zombie Strange. Now, zombies are a big thing for Raimi. Sort of. So technically, the Evil Dead franchise features Deadites, which are people who have been possessed by demons but can also get absolutely hacked to bits without dying. And come on, they look pretty similar to zombies. Before Zombie Strange can even get to Wanda, he gets attacked by the souls of the damned who aren't super happy that he's invaded a dead body. Now, there are a few different Raimi references to break down here. The first are these skeleton souls themselves, which look like the skeleton souls that we saw in Evil Dead 2. Secondly, the way they pull at him is a slightly less creepy version of when Christine Brown gets dragged to hell at the end of Drag Me to Hell. Also, it's kind of funny how the first thing he loses control of is his hand, both because this is what first drove Doctor Strange to learn magic and because of Ash in Evil Dead 2. The souls of the damned go flying out of 616 Strange's body toward Christine, and we get some iconic Raimi camera work. This shot is identical to the closing shot of the first Evil Dead, right down to the open mouth screaming. Christine weaponizes the brazier of Bomb Goliath and delivers this line.
Go back to hell.
Now, this is a bit of a generic stock line, but it's worth mentioning that it's one of the final lines in the Evil Dead 2013 remake, well, plus or minus a curse word or two.
Go back to hell, bitch.
Zombie Strange unleashed the souls of the damned onto Wanda. Now, we see a lot of the same camera work and references that we did when they first attacked Strange, but we get an added reference that ups the level of creepiness, this laughing. One of the weirdest and creepiest scenes in Evil Dead 2 is when the deer head starts to laugh. And in both of these scenes, the laughter sounds nearly identical.
Why can't I laugh like that? I want to learn to laugh like that.
Please don't. America sends Wanda to a universe where her kids are alive, but her multiversal twins are terrified of her. She tries to tell them that
I would never hurt you. Never.
much like Jack Torrance said to Danny.
Never do anything to hurt you. Never.
Now their fear brings Wanda back to her senses and she realizes that she has to close the Darkhold forever. For a while it seems like the day has been saved, everything's fine, and that Strange will suffer no consequences for using the exact same dark magic that he condemned Wanda for practicing.
Dreamwalking, you hypocrite!
But of course, nothing good can last, especially in a Raimi quasi-horror film. See, Sam Raimi is known for these stinger endings and Multiverse of Madness is no exception. From a strictly comic book perspective, the third eye represents the corruption of the Darkhold and is a reference to the third eye of Agamotto. Now, for horror movie fans, there are two parallels here. The first is from the 1961 Twilight Zone episode, Will the Real Martians Please Stand Up?
I'm the real Martian, yes, I'm the real Martian. All your other fake Martians are just not Martians.
So won't the real Dougie please stand up?
Please stand up.
Awesome, high five. And by the way, guys, if you are interested, we actually have this Doug ornament that we're selling at our merch store at shopzeroedition.com. We've also got brand new t-shirts we're excited to roll out soon. This ornament's great, it's high quality. I don't know if it's like ceramic or what, but it's not just a flimsy piece of plastic. It is going to last for generations, and you too can have Doug on your Christmas tree. So, Will the Real Martian Please Stand Up features a third eye in the exact same place, and even though it's from the 1960s, it still manages to haunt my waking nightmares. But this could also be a reference to Army of Darkness. The third eye, especially how it grows on Strange's forehead, is really similar to the scene where Ash grows a new eye on his shoulder. Both scenes feature screams of pain and the genuine terror of finding a new eye on your body. So this is actually a stronger parallel than Will the Real Martian Please Stand Up. In Army of Darkness, an entirely second body sprouts from Ash. So this is the bad Ash that we mentioned before, that good Ash has to bury. These two films aren't related beyond having the same director with a very specific style, but it is interesting how, when Strange grows his third eye, he is now carrying the corruption of the Darkhold, and in some ways, evil Strange within him. Now, with everything we've mentioned, it is hard to tell what is a direct reference versus a coincidental parallel. After all, Raimi started in horror and he knows all the tricks and tropes in the genre. But that's part of what makes the Multiverse of Madness so fun. When you have such a strong horror director do a superhero film, you're going to end up with a plethora of horrorisms to point out and dissect, whether intentional or not. But what do you think? Did you catch any horror references that we missed? Let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Brianna.